Hi, everyone. This is Iker. I'm the co-curator of the 2020-2021 cycle of Exhibit Columbus, along with my colleague, Mimi Iker. I'm thrilled to be able to moderate the conversation about resiliency and climate adaptation that is part of the 2020 Exhibit Columbus Symposium. The symposium started 2 weeks ago with the topic of future and technologies, and we continue every other week until October 29. So all these conversations are centered around the topic of new middles and ask one simple question: what is the future of the middle city? The question, posed from Columbus, Indiana, in the middle of the US heartland and also rooted in the Mississippi River watershed, is one important to many urban centers locally and globally. As we continue the Exhibit Columbus Symposium today, let's take a moment to reflect on the long history of a city named for Christopher Columbus in a state named for Indians. The land where Columbus, Indiana is located was ceded to the United States in 1818 through the Treaty of St. Mary's, yet this place has been a site of human activity for more than 12,000 years through the rich and vibrant cultures of Adena, Hopewell, Cahokia, Shawnee, Miami, Kickapoo, and Delaware nations. We recognize that the languages, cultures, and traditions of these nations continue to this day. Although we are gathering virtually, we remain entwined by land, water, and soil. Today's conversation stems from several questions. How is the Mississippi watershed and the plains ecosystem and habitat impacted by a changing climate? The COVID-19 pandemic raises issues on how might middle cities and landscape address global health challenges. And finally, what future-oriented ecological strategies will serve middle city landscapes and communities moving forward? So those are the three questions that we've started as a kind of like curatorial premise and thinking about this event. And we're thrilled to be able to discuss these topics with the two speakers that we have today. First one is Kate Orff, who's the founding principal of Scape, a landscape architecture and urban design studio. And she's also the director of Columbia University's urban design program. She joins us from New York. Hi, Kate. And then we're also joined by Iñaki Alday, Dean of Tulane School of Architecture and founder, together with Margarita Jover, of Alday Jover Architecture and Landscape. He's joining us from New Orleans. Welcome, Iñaki. So before the individual presentations and the panel conversation that we will have at the end, I think it would be great to have a moment to talk about these practices. And I think it's going to be better if Kate and Iñaki introduce themselves and present. So Kate, tell us a little bit about Scape, the work that you do, the topics that you explore, and also maybe how it's related to the work doing at Columbia.
Sure. Nice to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm just I have just a quick intro slide. So, but basically, I am a professor at Columbia. I am the founder of a 60-person firm called Scape, Landscape Architecture, with offices in New York and New Orleans. And so try to operate in these two realms of practice and teaching and academia.
Great. And it's great to have you again after featuring the work at the US Pavilion 2 years ago. That was fantastic. So I'm thrilled to have you here. And Iñaki, tell us also a little bit about your work as Dean at Tulane School of Architecture in New Orleans, how the school is maybe thinking about these topics, and also how those are connected to your own private practice.
Yeah, thank you, Iker. It's glad to be here with you, Kate, and all the design team. Yes, I'm since a couple of years ago, I'm Dean at Tulane. It's a small but really exciting school of architecture in a really exciting university in New Orleans, which is one of the most intense places that you can imagine. It's a very vulnerable place. It's one of the big deltas in the world, extremely vulnerable, and it's a place that brings everything that we have in crisis. Environmental, social, economical. And very exciting to be working in a kind of very intense environment. So it was a kind of natural fit for us. Our firm operates mainly from Barcelona. It's a hybrid practice. Our firm is architecture, buildings, urbanism, landscape architecture, and public spaces. And given the contemporary grand challenges that we have today, we feel very strongly about a kind of disciplinary fluidity. We are a little bit suspicious about discourses that talk about the core of the disciplines, not very functional for operating today. And we believe that there's that innovation happens in the fringes and in the overlaps of the different fields of knowledge. And what is the space of the unknown, much more than the introspection of the already known knowledge.
Oh, this is great. I think it's like very interesting, both the work that you're doing on private practices, the places where you're located, and how it has been addressing the climate challenges, both in the New York area and like Louisiana area, and then how that ties also to some of the academic initiatives that you have. So it's going to be exciting to talk to you about these challenges. So everybody knows what we're going to do is like Kate and Iñaki are going to present some of their work to frame the conversation, and then we'll have a overall group conversation afterwards. Everybody's welcome to send questions through the chat. We'll be able to have those conversations later. So without further ado, Kate, go first.
Great, thanks. Let's do that. And so I have a couple of slides to share, and I know that Iñaki and I really wanted to get to the conversation with you. So I'll try to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the work. And the topic that you chose was resilience and adaptation. And I do feel like more and more moving through into the future, we can't understand how to be resilient in the future unless we really fully unpack and understand the sort of systems of whether it's racism or carbon intensive development that have got us to where we are now in the climate emergency and in a sort of a crisis of social justice and injustice in our built landscapes. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on just this project called Petrochemical America with Richard Misrak, the photographer. This was done in 2011, 2012. This is a book project with Richard, and in the book I tried to sort of unpack the layers of what has made the American landscape over time, kind of integrating Richard's extraordinary photographs with a series of drawings and text that kind of pull and paint a portrait of how we got to where we are. So this, for example, is an image of bayou, sort of a looped and living system in the bayou, and it's contrasted with some of Richard's photographs now of ghostly poles. But basically trying to understand, how did this regenerative looped and living system get cut? Because it has been cut intentionally and not, and these sort of regenerative landscape systems have been replaced by systems of extraction and fossil fuel use, and of course carbon pollution. Importantly for this conversation and for Columbus, I know you're studying the sort of entire Mississippi watershed. So these decisions that are, these kind of actions that are taking place at a smaller scale, in this case, scale of what was known at the time as Cancer Alley, the zone between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. This is a map from one of the spreads of the book in the food chapter that shows the extent of nitrogen fertilization and atrazine fertilizers that then combine within the watershed and flow to the Mississippi and create a dead zone. Every year, there's always speculation as to how big is the dead zone in the Mississippi. And you can see in this little diagram here, I describe it in the book as this kind of like Faustian bargain between the watershed and the coast. So this is just a zoom into that in 2011. Of course, that was the year, the year that Richard and I were working on this book. That was also the year that Deepwater Horizon spill happened. So you had kind of compounding, frankly, what happened with Deepwater Horizon is that it was made the invisible network that you see here of pipelines and oil rigs visible for one moment in time through pure catastrophe. But the reality is, with climate change, that the catastrophe has been long and slow and frankly hard to cognitively wrap our heads around. So Petrochemical America as a project was very much about trying to do that and to set into stage into motion kind of more positive systems that look at climate justice, that look at reclaiming some of these landscapes. But so SCAPE as a practice is a really dynamic office. We're a big office now with two, space in New Orleans and New York. And all this is to say is that at a project level scale, plazas and parks and small scale, we also try to think about water and interrelated systems at multiple scales. So this is just one plaza that we've done that has sort of incorporated water in 5 ways. And that is very, contrasts with this 30-acre park on the shores of the Mississippi River for Memphis Riverfront Parks Partnership, which is a park that's sort of almost in the sort of final design stage or final construction drawing phase, which is going to really reconnect Memphis to the riverfront. And so this was an old landscape. It's on fill. It has an Army Corps dike that partially failed. But the point with landscape today and with design today is we have to think systemically and look across, but then we also have to kind of understand site connections, urbanism, and urban design at whatever scale of project that we're working on. And so that, to me, is a little bit of this dialogue between academia and practice. In practice, you're sort of starting in and like zooming out and connecting, but in academia, you're able to kind of map these connections and find moments. Another example of just, casual scape projects on the boards, we're really proud of this project called the Chattahoochee Riverlands, which is a large, cohesive planning project for Metro Atlanta. If you can see in this image, this is Atlanta, where my cursor is. This is almost 100 linear miles, very similar to the zone that I just showed you in Petrochemical America, the zone between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And in a great way, I always feel like this project is almost a kind of a response to the Cancer Alley book, in that with this planning project that was done with many, many partners, the Trust for Public Land, and over several years, the goal was to kind of restitch a contiguous public landscape along this entire length of the Chattahoochee and kind of reveal the riverlands and bring it back into the sort of fabric of the city of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, and frankly, disenfranchised populations along its entire reach. So scapers were here in mass. We did almost 100 meetings and events. And this also speaks, I think, to moving forward in resilience and adaptation. What is needed? It's never enough. 100 events, even though it, it took so much time from valuable time from community members, so much time from us and our staff, it's still never enough. So we need these kind of new frameworks and new strategies for engagement that really kind of can build up and help people, just help all of us sort of focus on what we need to focus and contribute. So we're excited about the Riverlands because it's really a counter, frankly, to the fragmented, industrial, polluted landscape that was described, that has and is sort of where we are now. It's really trying to stitch and mend and heal and link up these forgotten landscapes. So these strategies are described in this book, Toward an Urban Ecology, and in these 4 chapters: Revive, Cohabit, Engage, and Scale. They represent basically 4 big sort of strategies that the office is deploying in projects of different scales and sizes. And then I'll just close and hand it over to Iñaki in a minute by saying this is also another project which we're sort of working on in various phases, called Our Future Coast. And the idea with this project is, again, to try to look in a positive way at what can the world's biggest coastal restoration project mean for the coast of Louisiana, the wetlands, also known as America's wetlands. And from the map that I showed you before of the dead zone that's created, is that this is not a challenge that is specific to Louisiana. This is an American challenge. This is an American level challenge. This is our, a national scale initiative, even though it's playing out in this very, seemingly modest basin of Barataria. So without going into a lot of detail about, in this project, we worked with Dr. Don Bosch and a marine scientist and a number of other advisors on how to begin to combine up different restoration strategies and economic strategies to really push at this sort of revitalization of the basin, and broke the entire delta down into 6 basins, and then developed a movie and a video, and kind of tied it to the coastal master plan timeframe, and really trying to highlight and underline that we are in a race against the clock. And that's what this little diagram says here, is that we are in the process of emitting carbon, and we are in the process of subsiding wetlands and sea level rise. So there's truly an emergency. There's truly a race against the clock. And so I can share this video in the link or in the chat afterwards. But this also to say that the way that I'm trying to work has also changed. Like typically architects and landscape architects are making plans and sections and submitting drawing sets. We do that. We do a lot of that, but I feel like there is a huge communications gap and a huge communications error. And some of these kinds of projects where we're working in video and in other formats are really trying to hit that communications gap to raise awareness about the physical landscape. And then finally, and then this is my last slide, I'm very excited about, a discussion around resilience and adaptation, because it doesn't just mean working at a site scale and trying to think about whatever the challenges are, future sea level rise or increased fire events, etc. We also need to work differently as, if you want to even say professionals, or as disciplines, work together differently in broader front initiatives to move the ball forward. So this is something that I've been working on as part of a big collaboration. This slide is from the Green New Deal, Designing the Green New Deal conference that was held at Penn a couple of years ago now, or 2 years, last year. And basically it was a kind of just a sketch proposal of like, okay, Green New Deal now, how do we advance some of these projects? What would be transformational projects? But the big takeaway from that is now in the landscape world, as a board member of the Landscape Architecture Foundation, working with Billy Fleming and the McHarg Center at Penn, my center that I co-direct at Columbia, the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, ASLA, CELA, we've made a big coalition around a super studio along these lines. So that's my final close of, yes, we need to work differently. And it is a giant invitation to everybody listening to this session to join and participate in the Green New Deal. So I'll close there with an image of, in that spirit of working differently and working together. I am so thrilled to be part of, a group of climate feminists that have put out this book called All We Can Save, edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine Wilkinson. And this is a book that I'm so proud of and proud to be a part of. It really is looking at how we need to talk about the climate crisis differently, lead with the heart, and really kind of hit the reset button in terms of how we're thinking and working in the climate space. And so I'm totally excited to be part of this climate renaissance. All right, Iñaki, I'm stopping my share. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kate, because this is great, and there's one thing that I want to point out. A lot of these things we will talk later in the conversation, but the idea of everybody is downstream from someone else, so the actions that happen in one place really affect. So we can be looking at one point, like in Louisiana, and not really think about the larger U.S. or the larger, America as a continent. So those are kind of great aspects. So can't wait to talk later more about it. So Iñaki, all yours.
Thank you, Iker. I think I have started sharing my screen. Thank you again for the opportunity and for being in this great company. There's no question that climate change is the challenge of our times, and that our response will define how and if we will continue inhabiting this planet. I completely share the sense of urgency that Kate was posing in this last phase of her talk. I'd like to frame the topic around how cities can relate to water and to the reason of the location of most of them, including Columbus, Ohio, the source of its waters, the rivers. The climate change has accentuated the conflict in the relation between settlements and rivers. That is an essential resource and as a threat. The way we typically address this is through infrastructures, normally hard engineering infrastructures and occasionally green infrastructures. So I'd like to frame the topic in the infrastructures and in an alternative concept, the hybridity of infrastructures. We are especially interested in exploring three critical kinds of infrastructures: mobility, and this is an image of the green diagonal in Barcelona; energy, and this is the image of the power plant and video art center of Zaragoza, and of course in water, and the relation between water and river dynamics. I'll focus here as it seems most appropriate for the general framework of this discussion. The question is how to combine competing interests, neighborhoods or neighbors with their wish list, in this case a bullfight arena, environmentalists that are concerned about river pollution and deterioration, watershed authorities, engineers that are in charge of the safety of the town, urban planners that have a development mandate, etc. Here in Zuera, we explore the recovery of the riverbanks as public and nature space with a crazy idea at that time of designing the flood and integrating the flood even in the architecture of the bullfight arena. The ultimate objective of this line of work here in the 300 acres water park for the International Exhibition of 2008 in Zaragoza is to transform the idea of catastrophe, or better, to dissociate the direct connection between floods and catastrophe. This image was taken 1 week before the opening ceremony of the International Exhibition, and it was in all the Spanish media as a big crisis. The International Exhibition about water and sustainable development is flooded. And the media was also saying, but paradoxically, the water park, which is designed to be flooded, is not flooded. Of course, as you can see, it was flooded, as you see in the image, but it was not a catastrophe. Nothing was going on in the park. That was the answer. Of course, things were going on, but it was not catastrophic. It was not an urgency. So this park, the design establishes a gradation between the river waters, the restored riparian forest, the repurposed farmers embankment, the water cleansing and leisure areas, and all the programs in the park. And the buildings adapt to their condition, in some cases through lightness and permeability, and in others, like a boat, the theater below, that happens to be surrounded by flooding waters up to the half of the silver screen, several meters high. So the building has a concrete shell, doors as floodgates, redundant interior drainage systems, ballast and anchorage like a boat. A completely different situation. The ultimate purpose is to design a public space that is a performative hybrid infrastructure. Performance that can be measured, that can be monitored, and can be corrected if it is necessary. In this case, the water park has helped to soften the effects of a 25 years flood and a 10 years flood that have happened in the last 5 years, which clearly demonstrates that climate change has completely transformed the recurrence of extreme events, as we all are seeing all over the world. This kind of work shares the principles of the Dutch Room for the River operation that also started in 2008. And here in this case, this is a smaller river in Pamplona, also in Spain. And the investigation is about working at the public space scale instead of the large territorial scale that has been or is being developed in the Netherlands. So how you design a space that is used by people for 300 some days per year and by the river during the rest of the days in a way that the river does maintenance instead of damage, irrigates, fertilizes, renovates the wetlands, etc. And of course, again, the same question of how to make the buildings resilient to different degrees of flooding, counting on the drainage and the drying of these buildings and the area, how to design the utilities and the delicate infrastructures of a building for a major flood, so it would only require cleaning and not significant repairs. These are the questions that every time you're working in this environment are basic parts. So now our current investigations along these lines of inquiry are trying to bring together the territorial scale, the complexity of a metropolis and a capital of a country, and the human scale of the public space of the previous projects. This is an embankment that is being designed, 72 kilometers of embankment, 36 kilometers of river, both sides, and how to protect people and still be part of the river. These 72 kilometers of embankment are expected to increase this safety, the quality of life, and our work is try to understand at the same time the basic river needs, the hydraulic and the ecologic needs. And the purpose of the spatial design of the embankments, the placement of those embankments, in some cases right next to the river, depending on the geomorphology, in some other cases located away from the edges. So, and the integration of all the assets that the river has inside the space of the river or adjacent to it, is to transform an infrastructure, a flood mitigation infrastructure that would typically cut the connection between the people and the river, into a unique opportunity of a 72 kilometers long linear park that is structuring an entire metropolis and entering in the very dense areas of the city. So the embankment gives the opportunity, the infrastructure again gives the opportunity to connect pocket parks or pocket spaces and large parks that are part of the riparian spaces. During the floods or simply in high water seasons, these parks are part of the river space, and it's of our utmost interest is where the people and the territorial dynamics overlap and there's a conflict. This is the place. The complexity of the city, the livelihoods, the housing, even if in risk and precarious, each construction is a home. In our point of view, does not allow to take one side. The struggle is to make the river and its dynamics not a backyard, but that's an essential part of the urbanity of the place. That includes the urban ecologies, the human health, or economic opportunities among a myriad of factors. And understanding that infrastructures are the cathedrals of our time and are probably the places where most investments are being made and will be made, and the places where we can work having the greatest impact. So as a conclusion, we propose somehow that water and natural dynamics could move from the idea of protection to an idea of negotiation. The integration of the flood and the river dynamics in the public space, and the public space as a performative hydraulic infrastructure, as I was mentioning, that can be measured, corrected, evaluated, and the infrastructure as an opportunity for social public space and urban ecology. As I was mentioning, the major investments are going on now in infrastructure, and infrastructures are the opportunity for something else. In this case, for us, very clearly, the idea of public space, the idea of public use, and the urban ecologies. And this has very linked to the idea of transparency, of the public eye in the infrastructure and the hybridity of this infrastructure. We cannot afford having infrastructure that are one single use anymore. They do more damage to the rest of the systems that benefit only one. We are undoing a lot of infrastructures today that have these problems. So, and a summary, the integration of the changing conditions, we are not used to work with changing conditions and to eliminate the tipping point of the catastrophe. And with that, I'll turn it back to both of you and to Iker. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Iñaki. I mean, there are many overlapping topics and a lot of interesting things. I noted like the idea of negotiation between different users and also like physical conditions, having a transparent processes and creating many different ways of engaging with all the different people. The idea of reducing risk. So it's also like not with these hard infrastructures, but it's also like with soft infrastructures to understand how things work and then really work with that regenerate the ecologies at the same time. And the idea of bringing people to the rivers, and there's like that in a lot of the different large scale projects, but also individual projects in cities. How do we have that connection that it's fruitful, and it has been happening for many decades, but now as we have the climate challenges, how do we make that in a way that it is not one at the cost of the other one, or it doesn't create that extreme conflict? So those are kind of like amazing things. And I think one of the aspects, maybe we can start talking about the larger scale, where as a curatorial project, we're framing the idea of Columbus, Indiana, understanding it as one of the middles within the Mississippi watershed. And you've both worked both in the US and outside at this large scale. So I'm interested in knowing more, and Kate talked a little bit about that before, but when you think about that scale and you have that vision, sometimes that scale doesn't really operate at the same level of like governance or other entities. And I'm curious to see how, as designers, you've also tried to change your methodologies to address that. How do you have to change to begin to overcome political challenges or structural challenge to begin to envision something that it could have a big benefit?
Well, I mean, maybe there's two parts. I think as a designer, frankly, it's very, very difficult to overcome challenges relative to efficaciousness, right? We can draw and map, and that is kind of a hallmark of sort of Scape's work, is sort of mapping at the scale of the challenge and trying to describe the issues at the scale of the challenge. But where I'm really trying to dig in right now is trying to dig in at the scale of acting at the scale of the challenge. And, so that is very difficult. So yes, there are, just take the Mississippi watershed, for example. There are a number of consortiums, like interstate consortiums, around issues of water quality, for example. Do they meet very often? Not really. Is the Mississippi River kind of really seen holistically as an upstream, downstream kind of cohesive watershed? Probably not. There are kind of portions of the Mississippi River that have been designated as parks. If you look in Minneapolis and different, stretches in Clinton, Iowa, if you look at different stretches, there's different kind of levels of parks on some edges. Some edges it's completely, private, corporate owned all the way up to the levee, and that levee is unobtainable. So it's just truly a piecemeal water body. It's truly a representation of the fragmented and, frankly, market economy driven decisions that have been made over a century or over decades and decades and decades. So, and now this is where I get frustrated, because we're kind of like locked into this pattern. So a lot of, frankly, what, to pivot to what we can do as designers is, frankly, a lot of what we can do isn't really in that wheelhouse at all. We are trained to design things, to make things, to add things to the world, to sketch alternatives, but we're not really trained to like unmake, or we're not trained to advocate. We're not trained to say, okay, here's an alternative, sort of organizational structure that might incorporate these things. And we're not so well, some people are, but not so well trained in politics and advocacy. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's a very difficult question. And I think you could probably see from my talk, this like desire to like break open and, out of frustration, the desire to work with others, whether it's in the All We Can Save book, or whether it's the Green New Deal super studio. It's just simply the scales that we're working with, and that along with even 50 other incredibly super talented people, it's simply insufficient. So we have to invent these different frameworks of working in order for our work to like truly kind of find a nest and kind of like click into the possibilities of actual change. Because no more renderings, right? No more fancy renderings, no more floating hotel cities, that's done. We have to like just stop doing that, and we need to start doing other things so sorry, that's my little tirade for now.
I think I have a feeling who we were talking about, the floating cities, but I think it's very interesting. But before, sorry, with Iñaki, just the idea of I think you saw a little bit of like creating those frameworks needs to include new people, but also I'm very curious about the book, like toward urban ecology, that it becomes also like the book as an activist manifesto, as a tool for other people to be engaged. So I think there is something already there about how you're using your communication to get into that next step of the conversation. Iñaki, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say that Kate, you are extraordinarily talented in both helping us to visualize, which I think is a really important part of our work as designers, but also to advocate through your books and through your visuals. So in that side, I have to commend you and show my admiration. I think that it brings this question brings the idea of the potential, of the capacity of the designers. What is our role here? No? And I have to say that I have learned quite a lot, part in a professional practice that in which we have been typically in not the driver's seat, not in a really powerful situation, but then trying to drive the car through other means that is not brute force. And then through the work in the Yamuna River project in Delhi, from which I have learned enormously about what is the potential as of a university and of the designers in this case. No? For me, design is about dealing with complexity and dealing with contradiction and with conflict. For me, design is the creative management of complexity, let's say. There's no one like designers to have the ability to synthesize conflict. There's no design without conflict, let's say. No? But it requires something that for me it's essential and we often don't do. That is getting out from ourselves to fully embrace what's going on. Then is when we can be uniquely relevant. And when we don't do it, we are the most irritating people. I totally understand. And we frustrate people. So we can, what Kate does wonderfully as well, we can visualize alternative scenarios. Most of the fields are analytical, a few are prospective, and design is visually prospective. So we can show the transformation. And I have seen this power in advocating and working in Delhi and actually having an impact that is absolutely surprising, even to me, in terms of the capacity of giving hope and the capacity of doing that through synthesizing the complexity of the reality and being able to look holistically, something that typically nobody does, because typically the experts work in their area of expertise. And our expertise is to put together the complexity and to put together the conflict and to try to visualize the alternative scenarios.
And this ties perfectly with the idea of, you've both demonstrated that all these systems are interdependent. So we can be operating as a designer in an independent way, and many other voices have to be part of that. So whether it's like these large teams that are happening in academia or just as a private practice. So I think this is maybe talking about that on the Petrochemical America, which already pointed at a path of that health is not independent. So we're right now in the middle of a pandemic and we just look at it as a health crisis, but all these like climate adaptation, health, social issues, economic issues are all like completely intertwined. So let's just maybe talk a little bit, and maybe Kate, you can expand a little bit more of your findings of the book and maybe how that book really informed or the process of conveying to people the need to address one aspect through maybe tackling something that initially you might not be aware of.
Well, I mean, one of the many kind of revelations, or at least for me personally, that came out of that work was that the entire American consumptive way of life, it's not, we're all looking at our tiny thing of like, oh, should I buy this one thing, and it's the entire system is is creating essentially you know, a massive injustice relative to people's health. So it's not like these choices occur in a vacuum or they occur at the scale of X or Y, that there are large swaths of the built landscape that have been kind of unofficially declared as sort of sacrificial zones. So and you know, all props to the Bucket Brigade and Louisiana Environmental Action Network and all of the groups in Louisiana who have fought that tooth and nail. But it is, you know, there's no, I think that's one of the things, there's no like carbon emissions. It's not like CO2 is somehow like it's not invisible, it's invisible, therefore it doesn't like extremely impact our physical health and well-being. You have air quality indices, you know, off the charts, you know, leading to asthma and premature death in places all around the world. So I just feel like it's a sort of a collective, you know, blinding around consequences and actions and consequences of actions, and just the hope that our own wealth will insulate us from those negative consequences at some kind of time in the future. But, you know, and you know, on a totally, sorry to just pivot completely, but on a separate note around, you know, around if you kind of think about COVID and you think about the scale of the building or the scale of the site, I also feel like for some reason, and not to, you know, gang up on engineers, but the projects that Iñaki showed, these very beautiful, softer, flexible, more fluid projects are almost impossible to, you know, you could not put that in front of a civil engineer and have them be like, yeah, this pencils out, and then we're going to do this 9 things, and then I'm going to divide it by this, you know, these equations, and this is what it's going to be. It's like the principle of flow and connectivity is driving this. And this thing. And similarly with our architecture, we have this like, oh, if we can control and completely cut off our environment in 360 degrees, we're going to somehow control our airflow to the temperature of X to Y degrees. But the buildings that Iñaki showed are like flexible. You can, you know, move them and push things around. And it's like even the sort of approach to the building itself has kind of an adaptability or movability built into it. So I also feel like we've been running around with our professional expertise hats on, creating new problems and creating, you know, a mindset where it's very difficult to just simply address things head on. And the burden of proof is somehow always, you know, on the proposer. So all of these kind of negative projects, which represent, you know, existing to remain, whether it's a vertical bulkhead wall, a dam, you know, all of these elements in the built landscape are existing to remain, but to unmake them, you have to like fight like tooth and nail to be able to do that. So, you know, again, it sort of comes back to trying to advocate and trying to understand, you know, how to like really chip away at the issues at the scale that you're working at.
Yeah, I think it's you know, there's like that idea of scale also, and the visibility. I mean, to me, there is something also about addressing the problem in a comprehensive way throughout time, rather than waiting when we have the catastrophic flood or the fire, and the way we also even communicate those aspects where we're doing it through this kind of like sense of fear, and maybe like not building or documenting or communicating those aspects in a much more concise but effective way. And I think you were talking with using the videos, the different elements that you're using about that. And so I want to maybe talk about the idea of complexity of communicating the urgency about something that you might not be aware as a citizen. And how do we make sure that either as designers or just as part of a larger team, we're able to have or generate tools to communicate that without the idea of introducing fear?
Well, one of the things that we are doing is, I think, try to understand through our graphic analysis, to understand the processes and to understand that these processes have certain logics, and that we can be part of those logics. No? when looking at these sudden events that happen, these sudden events have kind of they are not coming out of the blue. They are coming with a logic, with a certain recurrence, and there are measures that can be taken. And the problem of confronting those as a who is going to win the battle is perhaps a kind of lost proposition. So for us, the idea of the negotiation, of understanding that we are part of larger cycles and that we need to be dealing with these cycles, like heavy rains, like floods, like multiple other events that we are witnessing, and then help to visualize that logic. Sometimes these catastrophes are governance catastrophes even. So one of the most impactful pieces of work that we have done in Delhi is to map the governance of the Yamuna. And it brings 27 agencies to govern the river. And we map with a political scientist, we map those and we put that in a big text. Is impossible to swallow. But we did a diagram on that. So we allow to see in one side the complexity of the situation. That has been the most impactful piece. So every time a minister or a chief minister was looking at that, was stopping the conversation, saying, this is what we need to address. And right now, from the 27 agencies, 7 or 8 of them are consolidated in one. That is all the state agencies in Delhi. So now there's a possibility of doing something else, no? And that's a design proposition in a way, no? The effort in synthesizing and being able to visualize and to communicate that catastrophe of governance in a way.
Yeah, I was just going to add to your question about fear. You know, how can we not only just pivot from crises to fears? I am in love with landscapes. I love being. I mean, and I can only imagine that most of the world also is, right. So I really feel like we have to come at this from a very different perspective now. I mean, we've all been trying to catch up with the science and catch up with the engineering, and yes, we doing that. But I guess where I feel like we have also, have a lot of work to do, and that this kind of goes to our Ecological Citizens project for the Biennale, which was just like a love letter to intertidal landscapes of the world, is to really sort of define and what we love and what is at stake. And the All We Can Save book was organized around this brief poem by Adrienne Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. And I feel like we have to somehow get this very positive, life-affirming, love of our landscapes back front and center, because they are just truly imperiled, and it's hard to confront the statistics of migratory bird death and bird strike and mass die-off, but we need to act, but we also need to sort of reorient our communications, not around is it 7.2 degrees of sea level rise or 7.9 degrees of sea level rise. It's that these intertidal worlds that are nurseries for our entire marine life, and the oceans that we depend on are going. So, and it's just incredibly, I don't know, I just a different way of trying to think about that. So I would try to put forward this more ethos of love and care and mending front and center in these conversations.
That's great. We definitely need more love and less fear. I have some questions here, so we're going to go into One from Micah Stanek, who says, I'm trying to act at the scale of the problem. That was one of the quotes from the presentation, and said, the Super Studio is a great tool. Since both Alday and Orff are leading academic programs, I'm curious how these aims bear on curriculum development.
Do you want to take that first, Iñaki? And then
I'm happy to. So there's one thing that I think is important to note is that academic institutions and research universities specifically have a power that no private has. The amount of expertise in different areas that is concentrated with a mandate on research, it gives an enormous opportunity for taking on the grand challenges. And this is true as a university or as a school as well. In our case, we have architecture, we have a real estate development, we have historic preservation, and a little bit of informally urbanism and landscape urbanism. So the curriculum brings one of the possibilities that the curriculum, at least at Tulane, does is introducing the research projects into the curriculum as part of the work of students and faculty as teams doing investigation. And that's formalized in our model of research studios that are taking issues like the transformation of the Port of New Orleans and the Inner Harbor Navigation Canal that Margarita Juber is doing, the work of the environmental inequality and poverty and community challenges that we do through the small center, including prisons that flood. Angola during Katrina, but more recently the women's prison. They are reconstructing it while women are in a men's prison dorm in a juvenile detention center. All this interconnection between climate change and urban equality and economic impact. Jesse Keenan is working in a series of things, and these pieces are intersected through the curriculum in some electives, some seminars, but especially in bringing the research to the class and changing the role of the student from an individual student getting some lesson, let's say, or some education to the student as a team member, as a member of research teams, which I think is really a mandate that we have in terms of producing knowledge, in terms of the maturity and education of student and faculty as collaborative people who are taking on serious challenges, instead of looking at our bellies and what we want to do. I make the pitch that I'm not interested in what anyone wants to do. I'm interested in what needs to be done. And that's a responsibility of that one person. No? So I think actually curriculum and academia are, for me, is the place where we can actually move the needle. If not, I would be in my office, not here.
Yeah, I can say a few words. So I'm the director of the MSAUD, the Masters in Urban Design program at Columbia, and it's a year-long, one calendar year-long, 3-semester course. And I've loved every second of that because for exactly the reasons that Iñaki mentioned, is that it's like a movement. You can create a movement within the curriculum because there's incredible teams of faculty and students, and when you're all have the same shared purpose and same goals, that it's amazing what you can do in the context of academia. So 2 things on that front. One is that I started to set up research centers or initiatives in the form of the Hudson Valley Initiative and the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, and then tie each of our studios in with one of these longer term threads of centers. So rather than the old model, which Iñaki referred to, which is like the single student, the single faculty member in this kind of atelier model, and you just do the work and then you move on. It's work that builds, that sort of is building on previous years, that, you really have much a wider array of expertise and kind of research that's like really carrying forward. So, so with the Hudson Valley studios, we were working really in the upstate, mid Hudson Valley region, a cluster of towns and cities there. And in the past 6 years, I've done this series of studios called Water Urbanism, which has looked at water in global cities relative to the climate crisis. So we have now 15 cities, and we're kind of comparing and contrasting many cities in India as well, Iñaki and Varanasi, Pune, Kolkata, Mumbai, a whole series of cities. And so, I feel like that's also incredibly important, because you can build up over time and compare and contrast and learn from the past. And just this past year, we did a studio on the Great Rift Valley, which was a kind of a north-south geological transect, if you will, made up of 5 different rifts. And we're looking at 3 cities, including Tel Aviv, Yafo, Addis Ababa, and Beira, Mozambique, and had students kind of all working together. So in the end, we kind of were able to advance this sort of dialogue at this, global scale, if you will. And we also got to delve very deeply into the unique characteristics and kind of situations in each of these city regions. So it's just such a dream to teach in this context, and I love our students and our fellow faculty.
Yeah, I think we are describing a very similar model that changed from the inventing the wheel every semester to really build on the work that has been done previously and continuing. For us, it's essential. Our studios, our research studios are 3 or 5 years working in the same place and going once and again. And the challenge is how you transfer knowledge. Because in science, you have a lab in science is working in a research, and it takes X time. And the team is basically constant, of course, with renovations. In our cases, we have a big challenge of the team changes every semester. So how you transfer that knowledge and how you also improve much more through the renovated energies of one generation after the other. And so how you reconcile not starting from scratch, to learn from the previous and to move it to the next level. I think that's probably a new model of how we face research in architecture schools and innovation and the pursuit of knowledge that is as substantial as possible. And I'm happy to be accountable as any other field. I actually make a pitch of we need to be accountable for what we are producing that goes beyond ourselves to be objective new knowledge out. Great.
I see that the time is like, we have a few minutes, but we have a few questions. So this is gonna be like a rapid fire, but we have one from Mimi. It says, care and maintenance were mentioned by both Kate and Iñaki. How can design encourage people to caretakers of their local river systems?
I would love to so in our studios, we work with a woman, Gita Mehta, who's been advancing like social capital credits and others who are more interested in water and fluvial dynamics and so on. So I really feel like there's, we need to break out of this, market-driven way of like paying people to maintain, and we need to develop these sort of stewardship structures and incentives for participatory action. So I totally agree that there's there needs to be a different model on the horizon, because right now it's based on this sort of capital intensive model, and it's not enough.
Sorry, very quickly. I think there's an issue of how you get in love, or how people get in love with the space, how appreciate beauty and wellness, and how takes pride. And this is something that is very clear, especially in post-colonial places like Delhi and other places in which the public space is the place of the enemy, of the army that is colonizing. as opposed to be part of the citizens' domain. No? So the build of this sense of pride, the identification with the place, the little. I'm most in favor of the little luxury in the public space that people have the right to enjoy as something that is collective but is owned by. And I think that designers will have a strong role in helping to mediate and to offer the possibility of loving the place.
And we also need more time. This is what we have now with, I mean, I hate to say, well, we need more time literally for the session because we have 1 minute left, but in our lives, I mean, I'm as guilty as everyone of just running around and running onto a flight, into a meeting, into this and that. And I do feel like in this situation where we're all able to meet like this, and I find myself with more time for those very acts of care and maintenance that Mimi brought up. And I'm only hoping that we can translate some of this, what we've learned through the pandemic times, into very positive, action frameworks.
Great. So we're not going to go through all the other questions. I think it's like some of them had been answered, but this is great. And as I agree, we need more time because this is kind of like a very complex and nuanced, and we need a lot of kind of like deep conversations. But I think this is one of like the kind of like a good format to begin to engage in that. And I think both of your work is giving a path, not only like to really see the design solutions, but a methodology and a way to approach and be an activist about what can be done, and not be someone who's just kind of like that doesn't know how to perform or how to be part of as a designer of society. And I think it's just giving path on the books, the films, the different approaches that you're doing from your private practices and the universities is really remarkable. So I just encourage everybody who's watching today to really follow and also be engaged and identify other local community members, organizations that are already doing the work, and see how you can all do it. So thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much, Iñaki, for the great conversation. And thanks everybody for watching.